Welcome to Bigfoot
and the Bunny.
This is a couple's journey into the mysterious,
the unknown, and the paranormal.
I'm your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm your host, Kristen Johnson.
Together we are Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Welcome to Bigfoot and the Bunny. Happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday.
It's serious Saturday. It's so serious. How are you guys doing? Your host, Chris Carr.
And I'm Kristen Johnson, I think.
We think. And it is Saturday. It's time for Bigfoot and the Bunny. We have a great show for you guys.
Me too.
We're going to get right to things today. I don't really have anything prepared for an introduction. So we'll bring on our guest and talk about her new book. She's been on a show before. We love her. Her name is Lynn Monet. She's a Florida native. She was born in Sarasota, Florida, and raised in Palm Beach County. She currently resides in Travelers Rest, South Carolina. She's the mother of three. She has been a nurse for 35 years. Lynn specializes in medical surgery, urology, and in the last 17 years, geriatrics. She currently works in a management position in a large nationwide insurance company and is an author. After the purchase of her dream home, Lynn's enthusiasm quickly turned to heartbreak and questioning of her faith as she fights to protect her children against unwelcome inhabitants living in her home. And she had two books on that subject. That very subject was Omnipresent and Omnipresent, What Happened Next, which we mostly focused on last time she was on our show. And our new book is called Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. So let's bring her right on. Hey, Lynn.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm usually here talking about creepy stuff, but I have a very beautiful story to share with you. As we were talking beforehand, you know, the darkness likes to dub out the light. And of course, that's obvious with all of the things that are even going on in the world right now, you know. I've had to take this book off market. I'm in the process of rewriting it because the file completely disappeared. It is completely disappeared. I usually send it out for safety to family members and things like that to hold it for me, like as I get to certain points. And even those emails that I go back to, the attachments have the files, but there's nothing but paper, like papers with no wording on them. So
that's amazing.
The darkness, like I had mentioned to you, the darkness likes to be noticed, but they don't like being exposed.
That's it.
So, And you know, it is a beautiful story, about that. So, I'm hoping to have it out by the end of May.
Hey, Ken Allen. Ken Allen's out there. Hello, my friends, Bigfoot and the Bunny.
Hello, Ken.
Ken Allen, the host of the Wizard's Table podcast, which I believe is on today right after us. You can find them on Facebook, The Wizard's Table. Excellent podcast. Yes. So the attachments are blank even. It's like your backups are getting erased and, you're constantly just like trying to rewrite the same stuff and get it out there.
I actually took it to Best Buy and had them take it, put some detailed thing on it to try to extract it, because I thought, well, maybe, I had bumped a delete button or something. And they said that they would have been able to find it if it had been deleted, and it's nowhere.
Wow.
But like I said, that happened with my first book twice. So finally, I had to put it in an SUV drive with a cross on it in order to hold it. And that's the only way that it got completed.
And that worked.
Holy mackerel.
Wow.
Literally. Yeah.
Now, the first two books are about the omnipresent haunting, which is this kind of demonic haunting was really scary. It's a really scary book.
Well, it is. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the new one has a more positive message to it.
Yes, it has a beautiful, beautiful message to it. Being a nurse, I've been a nurse, as you said, for 35 years. 17 of that has been in end-of-life care. Also, after going through that experience with the house that I was never able to move into, I was able, my abilities to see interdimensionally kind of came forward again. And just to say this, when I was younger, I grew up in a haunted house. The house that we lived in was just a few short blocks behind a hospital that was connected to a nursing home. On the other side of that were supposed Indian mounds. So my siblings and I would see people in patient gowns walking through our house, ghosts and the Indians. And of course, this embarrassed my family. And they didn't really want to have it talked about so that the neighbors would find out, because back then it was all about what the Joneses thought. So when I got to be about 10 years old, I was Presbyterian up until 10 years old. My mother did a bout with the Jehovah's Witnesses. And because I was still talking about seeing things, and they weren't things like pink elephants, they were like people, or even people that had passed away that my parents even knew of. There was for instance, that made my mother take me to the elders. My brother and I were sitting in their master bedroom of their house. And I was, of course, playing in my mom's jewelry box, and my brother had his Hot Wheel track set up on the floor, and he was playing with that. And all of a sudden, I turned to show him how glamorous I look, and of course, he didn't care. But he was staring in the corner of my parents' bedroom, and there was like this misting in the corner of the room. And all of a sudden, my brother's very best friend stepped into that. And then his family, mother, father, and two sibling brothers stepped in behind him. And they're all standing there smiling. Well, my brother and I get up at the same time, running. There were two doors to exit the master bedroom, running out of different doors to go and get my mom. And of course, my brother found her first. And he's like, Mom, John and John's family's here. And my mom's like, well, I didn't even hear them knock. And she's straightening herself, going down the hallway. He says, no, they're in your bedroom. She says, they're in my bedroom. Who let them in my bedroom? So she's, questioning this. And of course, when they got back to the bedroom, nothing was there. So my brother got in trouble by my mother for even, saying that sort of thing. But I had seen it too. And the next day when he went to school, he got on the bus and he normally sat next to his best friend. His best friend was absent that day. It was the first day back from spring break. And my brother knew that his best friend's family had taken a week-long vacation out of town. So when he got to the classroom, he also sat next to his little best friend. And of course, the desk was empty. And the teacher, shortly after taking roll and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, stood up and explained to the class that John would no longer be coming back to school because he and his entire family, perished in an accident the day before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it just so happened that my mom was
like a fire or something?
Pardon me?
Was it like a fire or
It was
something?
A car accident.
Car accident. Wow.
Yeah, but that was back when they didn't wear seatbelts and cars were metal,
Right.
So flying down the road. But the thing is both he and I saw it at the same time. And of course, when my mother got involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses, she took me in front of those elders, and they scared me so bad at 10 years old, telling me what I was seeing was demons, telling me, all of these things that were wrong with me, that I was going to die in in Armageddon and not make it to their new order, and all kinds of stuff that just a 10-year-old shouldn't even have to.
Yeah. How do you wrap your head around that stuff?
Yes, exactly. So, it got to the point where I started to ignore my gifts. I would rationalize them. I would notice them and not say anything, and it even got to one point that I was actually afraid of them, because I started to believe that I was seeing demons, that even these ghosts of patients walking through our house and stuff like that. So I just got very, very quiet and kind of subdued my gifts for a while. But when going forward into that house, everything just started to come back like a flood. And again, I would still see glimpses of things, but until I got out of my under my parents' roof, I kind of still had to go along with my mother's beliefs. So with that being said, when the reason that I wrote this book is I'm really, really hoping to take the stigma of death and dying away so that people can have a better understanding. This book is really going to do well for people who have terminal illness, or maybe have recently lost a loved one, or or know that one may be passing. So when my mother passed away, she had cancer. A year before she died, she stopped treatment, and we had that year to check off her bucket list. We did things like, the recipes to make sure that we knew what that dash or pinch was, so that the flavor of we would have those dishes at our holidays and things like that still, and have a piece of mom there. We went through old pictures, and she, would tell me who the people were that I didn't recognize, and she passed those out. And we did a lot of things prior to her death. And the thing is about death is a lot of times, let me just back up a second. I'm sorry. There's a difference between natural death, sudden death, and near-death experiences. My mother's death was a natural death, and most people's are. So I'm going to kind of focus on that one first. And a lot of times those people know that they're getting ready to go. My mother went around the day before she passed away telling people goodbye. She even told one woman who had a dog that had just passed away 2 days earlier that she would take care of her dog until the lady could get there. I've had patients do that. I've had a lot of people do that, and I've got stories to back that up. But this book was written around my mother's death. And my mother and I, during that year, we made a pact. And I said, Mom, sometimes life is so stressful, and I know that you're going to be coming in and out and checking on me, but I really want to know for fact that you're there during those times. And my mom had this beautiful, long, beautiful opalescent, very, very long hair. It was white. And of course, in my house, everybody's brunette. So hers was very different. And I said, I want you to leave one of your hairs. And they can do this. They can leave things for you. They can, they use symbols, but they can leave things for you if you ask them to. So what had happened is on the day of her funeral, I actually ran a bathtub to kind of soak and relax before the funeral. And I put a little bit of bubbles in it. And literally right on the top of those bubbles, lengthwise, one of my mother's hairs were there. And then there was another time too. I was in school. I'd gone back to school to further my degree and to my nursing degree. And I was living in a house that she had never been in. I was driving a car that she had never been in. She had already been gone for about 5 years at this point. I went to the school bookstore. I picked up a 3-ring binder and some loose leaf papers that I was supposed to put in it. And I went straight from there with the things in the bag to my car, from my car into the classroom to my desk. And when I opened the 3-ring binder, there was looped there were the 3 teeth. It was looped in the center one, a white opalescent hair. Now I would fight God for my children. If God ever came to me and said, I'm going to take your kids, we would have a talk. Yeah, no. You know what I'm saying? So, and I swear on my children's lives that this happened. And, there's no way that hair could have gotten there on its own. And that particular day, I had a very, very hard exam that I was taking, and I was fretting about it. So opening up that notebook and finding that really, really brought a lot of comfort to me. And they can do that. They can leave behind things. They can move feathers. They can move cards. They can, leave symbols of ladybugs or things that aren't even, you're not even expecting to have them be around during certain times of the year.
Things that remind you of your parent. And this hits home for me because I lost my father last month to cancer and the end of life care, God bless you. It's not easy work. I can't even imagine.
Well, and I guess, I see in my profession, and because of what I've learned, I look at it a little bit differently. And to me, I'm hoping that this book will help people, and I'll let you know why as I go along a little bit. When the day that my mother passed away, my brother was trying to get there, but I ended up being the only one in the room with her when she passed away. And she was laying in the bed peacefully. I was sitting in the recliner next to her. And all of a sudden, I see on the opposite side of her bed, it was like a misting from floor to ceiling, and it was like meeting the walls. And through that, I could see elbows peeking out. I could see like a foot with a pant leg. And yes, they do show up with clothes. It would be pretty shocking if they showed up naked.
Yes.
True.
The spirit will try to crawl back in their body because I don't want to know that much about them. But they do show up in clothes. And so I'm watching this. And all of a sudden, on the end towards my mother's head, it started to open. And I see my grandmother, my mother's mother, walk in. And she looked the exact same as she did the last time that I saw her. She had on her leisure suit and her little tight curly perm. She even had her glasses on because they present themselves the way that you see that you remember seeing them last. So she comes over to my mother's bed, and I'm watching this, and my mother was propped up just a little bit for breathing purposes. And my grandmother walks over, and her spirit starts stroking the inside of my mother's forearm. Now, my mother was still responsive at that point. She was no longer opening her eyes. She was no longer able to verbalize, but she was still moving her eyebrows appropriately and mouthing words like, for instance, if somebody came in and said, "Hi, Phyllis," she would do that thing, and it was appropriate. So she was still aware. She had, even though she wasn't able to communicate like we do, she was aware. So my grandmother, she was stroking the inside of my mom's arm. She leaned forward and said something into my mother's ear, and immediately my mom starts doing that eyebrow and mouthing thing. And then my grandmother stands up, and my mom continues, and then my mom stops. Then my grandmother leans forward again and says something in her ear. My mom starts doing that again. And this happened 3 times. In the meantime, I'm watching, and I see this frantic wave from behind my grandmother's head. And it was my beautiful sister. My sister had been murdered when she was 20 by a jealous boyfriend. And
I'm sorry.
Her perfume, she wore this perfume called Latisse in the 80s. And her perfume just filled the room. I could smell her, and she kind of came out and around and actually embraced me. I could feel her long hair falling over my face. I could smell her perfume. I could just feel her essence there. And then as she started to go back around the people, or where the veiling was, that whole veil had effaced. And there were a whole bunch of people in there, lots and lots of people. There was a picnic table looking thing underneath, like this beautiful tree that had a cloth on it. Of course, there was no food or anything on it, but I will tell you why later, because I did find out something that my mom told me. But anyway, all of these people were there. There were colors there that we don't have here. You would need a completely different color wheel to even describe them. It had a light to it that emitted from within the atmosphere itself. There was like not a sun source or something, and the lighting was perfect. But it just emitted like within the atmosphere itself.
That's really interesting.
As I'm sitting there, I'm watching this, and I'm feeling all of the elation coming from the other side. I'm feeling, I'm watching all of this, and you can't help but sit there and smile. I mean, there are the feeling that I felt from that. There's nothing that can touch it. There's no words that can touch it, no feeling that can touch it. And you just can't help. It's like food almost. You crave it. And as I'm standing there watching them, all of a sudden I notice a whole group of the spirits up towards the head of my mother's bed. And they're like it looked like they were like in a football huddle type thing. And I'm thinking to myself, what on earth are they doing? Why are they doing that? So when they went ahead and they opened up, my mother was standing in the center of them. It was as if they were trying to stabilize her spiritual feet. Mm-hmm. Now, I then, shortly thereafter, I'm sitting there grinning from ear to ear. people are approaching my mother that came to visit. Some of these people I also recognized and had met during this lifetime that were approaching her, that had crossed over. There were other people that came and crossed over to greet her. There were people that I didn't know, but she knew. And so all of a sudden I look over at the bed and I realize that my mother has stopped breathing. And I will say this too, about 10 minutes before that, when my grandmother came through, my sister came through, I did, give my mother a kiss, and I told her, I said, Grandma and Robin are here to take you home. And of course she did the mouthing thing, towards me. And 10 minutes later, has stopped breathing. So I'm watching all of these festivities on the other side of this room, each of these people coming up and greeting my mother. And then they kind of go off and go back to doing whatever it is that they were doing. And, type thing. And in the process of that, I did call the nurse. I'm sitting there thinking, here I am grinning from ear to ear because of the elation. My mother's just died, but to me, she's not dead because I can see her standing there. So, but I'm thinking, what is the nurse going to think if she comes walking in the room and my mother's just died and I'm grinning from ear to ear? That's not a normal response. So, the nurse came in, pronounced her, that she was gone. And, so they walked through actually the whole festivity. The nurse walked through the festivities that were still going on in the side of the room, and they didn't seem to be, bothered by it at all. They just continued doing what they were doing. And then she left, and I asked if I could stay in the room. And the whole process took about 15 or 20 minutes of our time, because time on the other side is timeless. So we're the ones that have the time elements. So in our time frame, it was about 15, 20 minutes.
We believe that.
Yeah.
I'd also like to say, you mentioned the color wheel and the colors. It's something I've heard near-death experiencers, NDEs, talk about when they're kind of on the other side and they see these colors. They're like, they can't describe them. They're like, we don't have those colors.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating that you see that when you see that. And I'd ask you, do you notice a difference between, say, seeing the spirit of somebody in your family versus, say, the presence that was in your house that was haunted, that was demonic?
Yeah.
Does it appear differently to you?
Well, actually, the way that I see things is I can see things very clearly as I can see you out of my peripheral vision. When they get a little bit closer to me, it's more of a waffling to the air, almost like hot vapors coming off of a street or fumes out of a gas can. Mm-hmm. So I can see them better at a distance. And I can, and like I was seeing those elbows and pant legs sticking out, they weren't colorized like I would see them out of my peripheral vision. So it was about the same. But because I was looking at them directly, it was more of like when you walk up to a large plate glass window on a store and see yourself, that kind of, it's translucent kind of way. It's the way that I saw them on the other side of the room. Of course, as they filed out past me and got closer, it was harder for me to see them. I could see the wavering, but I could see feet and knees and things like that, going past. But with my mother, when those the people that remained in the room, there were about like 10 of them. They were beautiful angels. My mother, my grandmother, my sister were still there to help my mom cross over. Some of them were very tall, walking with her. And I don't know, they have the superstition about windows being cracked when people pass away. I've never done that, and maybe it was just a coincidence. But the windows were behind me. So as the angels and the beings started to file out on my left-hand side, they kind of stopped and they made connection with the top of my head. And it was tingly where they would like lean in. And as my mother approached, I recognized her because she had beautiful legs. And I recognized her legs, and she was still in her patient gown, and she was following along with them, and they were like filing out into a line. Sorry, I got something in my eye real quick. So after seeing that, I never grieved my mother. And there have been some funny things too. I remember November, my mother had passed away in July, and she was always the one to make the Thanksgiving turkey dinner. And now it was my turn to make it, and I'd never made one before. So I'm preparing the turkey in the kitchen, and I hear my mother like a megaphone, "Don't forget the aluminum foil." And I'm like, I'm not going to put any aluminum foil on there. I want one of those big brown turkeys like the ones on TV.
Right.
Well, I learned real quick that the breast got burnt and the legs were raw. And that was the reason we ended up having hamburgers, I think, for that Thanksgiving. So I learned that lesson really, really quick. And also, you know, there was one time, and this is the thing with the table, I said to her, I said, "Mom, don't you ever miss, you know, the brownies that you used to make, the taste of potato salad, you know, those yummy things that you used to enjoy eating. Don't you miss those?" And she comes right through again like a megaphone. She's loud. And she said, "Well, here we don't eat." She said, "Here we do everything through thought. We communicate through thought. We travel through thought." She said, "And all we have to do here is think of the item like the brownie or the potato salad, and the sensation comes to us and the flavor comes to us as if we are actually eating it." And I'm thinking, well, why can't it be that way here? You know,
Right.
no calories, you can eat whatever you want.
That reminds me of astral travel. We've had astral projection experiences, and in my experiences with them, it's just a matter of thinking you want to be somewhere, and you're just there. And that sense of time, too, is also just gone. So I imagine it's similar, but probably a more enhanced way of doing that. And I had a part B for the other question was, do you think that when we're talking about whether it's something nefarious, like a demonic presence, or, you know, something like a family member, that they want to be seen, and that's why you see them? Like you have the ability to pick up on them psychically and see them in your peripheral or whatnot. Do you think that they always want to be seen? In other words, like you could never surprise a ghost. Like you wouldn't walk in a room and the ghost go, "Oh," you know, that kind of thing.
That's a really good question. And because I don't really know with the ghost thing. I think some of them, I had a, for instance, one time with a ghost, and I'm going to speed ahead on this a little bit. I was working as a nurse, and I had a client that was actively passing. And a lot of times in the type of a place that I was working, it was a skilled unit with multiple levels of care. A lot of times wandering souls, because souls at the time of death can choose to cross over or not. And the difference, and I'll just say this really quick, the difference is when you see them is they're more in a perfect form. When you see them, then they have crossed over. When they have not crossed over, their wound, their cause of death still shows. They still have emotions and addictions, and those sorts of things. So they can be a little bit creepy sometimes. But this particular night, I was getting medication for the client to help make them more comfortable, and I see this ghost man peeking around the corner. We had these pillars inside of this place. It was very fancy, and he was peeking around the pillar, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, "Hi,
can I help you?"
Yeah, and he looks, and he starts looking around his shoulders, because here this man, by his dress, he was maybe the 1800s. Had been ignored for centuries. And I'm like, "No, and he was a handsome man. I mean, he was well dressed. You could tell that he had money, not a lot of money, but the clothes that he had on were very nice clothes."
He wasn't a pauper.
Pardon me?
He wasn't a pauper.
No, he wasn't a pauper. And he had kind of a Swiss cheese look to his abdomen off to the side. So either he died of cancer or maybe cirrhosis of the liver, some kind of a corrosive disease took him. You could still see it. And I asked him, I said, "Why have you not crossed over?" He had this very, very heavy brogue, kind of like an Irish brogue, and so he kind of came towards my cart, but on the side, so I could still see him clearly. And he said to me, "Milady, I can't cross over. My mistress and my wife were on the other side, and neither one knew about the other." So this poor guy chose to stay earthbound all of this time because he was cheating and he didn't want to have to face the music of running across his wife or his mistress having to explain. So I said to him, I said, well, look, this lady here is getting ready to pass. Her family's here. If you want to cross over, I can help you out. I said, you can even go with these people, maybe. I said, not that you have to have a group of people to go with, but usually a group's around when you do cross in a case of a natural death. So he just kind of looked at me and I said, look, most people can't see you. I said, and if they could see you, they'd run screaming away. I said, and I can help you cross over if you want to. And he just kind of then smiled and he faded away and I never, ever, saw him again. But, when people do pass away, they do have the choice of staying earthbound or not. And usually the ones that choose not to are the ones that end up haunting houses. And not only that, a lot of them are from many, many centuries ago. So not century, like maybe a century ago, they show up in clothes, some of them even older than that, but it's because of their religious beliefs and the way that things were addressed even back then for, mental illness and things like that. Yeah. So, and a lot of times too, a parent might be caring for a child that has illness or special needs or something that they are assuming that either that child or their parent or their loved one's going to cross over before they do, and then they end up going, and they stay to continue to kind of hover over and keep close to that person. And then when that person passes away, they get stuck here. So the longer that they're here, the more they get stuck here because it's harder for them to cross over. And really, it's very, very simple. And just tell them to look up. Because when you see a ghost, they're looking straight ahead or side to side or down. They're never looking up. And if they would just look up, they can reconnect with that cord. And the cord will assist them to cross over. So if you see any wandering ghosts and they can choose not to go, tell them to look up and look for the cord. And it will come to them. They'll see it. And you'll see them quickly. Sometimes even, just disappear unless they, are apprehensive about going. And again, they don't have to go. So anyway.
So you say there's a cord that they should be doing. Like most people would say, go into the light. Well,
the light it's like a cord light. It's gold. It's glistening. But it comes down like a ribbon almost and helps to pull them at that point because they've kind of missed out on the big to-do, the reception that just everybody gets, even with sudden death, but it's different. They don't get it right away. So, that is the light, but it's like a cord. They need to look up and that cord connects. We're all connected to the other side with cords. We're connected to our children with cords. We're all, and when we go to cross over, our cords cut basically to the people that are grounded here in that sense so that we can go forward, even though we're still connected to them in other ways. The same as our at the other side, we have cords and connections over there that kind of pull us up, and that takes them into the light where they can, do that. But definitely tell them go to the light, but they need to look up. Definitely look up for the light.
More people in general need to look up.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention real quick. I think your microphone's moving a little bit. I don't know.
It's like you're shaking your leg or something.
If it's stationary, but it's going to it's tapping.
Okay. I will take my arms off the table. It's probably me wiggling around. I'm going to bring you a little bit closer.
There you go. Cool. Sorry, just to take out some of that noise. But,
no, I'm glad you did. I noticed sometimes I was holding it and I could see that it was wiggling and on another video. But and speaking of the fact that, a lot of people know when their time is to come. A lot of times people will start talking about seeing loved ones or their parents. And many, many times because other people can't see those things too, they assume that it's hallucinations. And I had a patient, I'm going to call her Abigail. She and her husband had come to the facility that I was working in because her husband was deteriorating and his health was deteriorating, and he needed the 3 levels of care. So it just so happened that Abigail slipped and she fell, and she was on my unit recovering after she had hip surgery. And she was talking about seeing her parents. And the doctor was getting ready to start her on medication for hallucinations. And I was on duty. I came on duty that day, and I noticed that, and I went into the room, and I had built a rapport with Abigail. She was has to be one of my favorite patients. I was partial to her, but the care was the same for everybody. So anyway, she said to me, she said, she says, "Lynn, do you think I'm crazy?" And I'm like, define crazy, because we had that rapport. I was teasing her a little bit, and she said, "No, really, crazy. And I said, "Well, no, why?" And she said, "Well, I see my parents." She said, "I know my parents died 30 years ago, she said, a long, long time ago, but I see my parents, they come and visit me, and it makes me feel good. It makes me happy. And the doctor's getting ready to put me on medication for hallucinations starting tomorrow morning. Do you think I'm hallucinating?" And I said, "Well, do you think you're hallucinating?" And she said, "No." And well, of course, I have a different belief. And I'm like, "Well, if you don't think you're hallucinating, I don't either." And fortunately, she was discharged the next morning back to her apartment. And I told her that in report, I had heard that she was going to be discharged. And I also told her, as your advocate, you can refuse. If you are of sound mind, you have the right to refuse the medication. You do not have to take it. So she was happy with the fact that she was going back to her room. So about 6 months later, her health started to decline rapidly, and she was then placed back on my unit. And I remember them talking about the fact that she was now talking about also a young woman and a little girl that would come to her room. And the problem is that she was then sneaking cookies and desserts from the dining room and bringing them to her room to feed the cookies to the little girl. And we were getting roaches in her room. So we had to start checking her pocketbook and whatever she was taking before we take her out of the dining room. So one day I worked a day shift for a friend of mine. I normally had worked the night shift, and I was leaving the nurse's station to go down the hallway to start my treatments. And I passed Abigail's room, and out of my peripheral vision, well, let me just back up. When I passed Abigail's room, she was sitting in a recliner next to a very large window with an air conditioner underneath, kind of like the kind they have in hotels, those underneath air conditioners.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she had a piece of yellow butterscotch wrapped candy, and she was holding it out. And if anybody else had walked by, it would have looked like she was trying to feed the air conditioner. So as I'm walking by out of my peripheral vision, I catch this young woman with a little girl standing in front of her. The woman had on a white peasant blouse. She had on a longer denim skirt, black hair, long to the shoulders, a little bit Indian looking. The little girl had the same kind of hair, only she had bangs, black hair. She had a light colored little dress with a pinafore, little Mary Jane shoes. And I went past, and I thought, well, wait a minute. I don't remember those people checking in at the nurse's station. And of course, in the hospital, you have to have a head count just in case there's an emergency. So the fire department knows how many people they have to get out. Mm-hmm. So I stepped back went into Abigail's room. And of course, there was nobody there. But I could still see that waffling in the air. And Abigail was trying to feed the butterscotch candy to the little girl that was standing in front of her. So I'm standing there, and she says to me, she says, "Oh, let me introduce you to my friends." And she says, "This is my nurse, Lori." And she says, "Isn't the little girl beautiful?" And I said, "Yes, she is." And she almost came out of her chair. She's big. She says, "Can you see them?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Don't tell anybody, because they'll put you on medication for hallucinations."
Right.
So here this woman was being actively medicated for hallucinations. The hallucinations didn't stop because they weren't hallucinations. And she continued to see these people. About a week after that, I had come in on my night shift, and she was in an active decline. And she had been declining over a couple of days. So I walked into her room, and I patted her hand, and I said, "Hi, Abigail, it's Lynn. I'm here to take your blood pressure." And she kind of perked up. They do this rallying thing where they look like the lights are on, but nobody's home, and their feet are flaccid. But then all of a sudden, they come back into a body because they're testing the waters, and their eyes brighten and their toes perk. And every nurse will tell you that they've seen this happen with somebody that's actively passing. But anyway, she was in that moment of rallying, and she said to me, "Oh, I'm so glad that I get to see you one more time." She said, "My parents are coming for me tomorrow, and they're going to take me home."
Oh,
and I said to her, I kissed her on the cheek. I gave her a hug. I told her that I hope she had a smooth transition home with her parents when they come, and that I enjoyed taking care of her. And she said, "And you know something?" She says, "You're very much loved on the other side." And this makes me cry to this day. She said, "You're very special over there, and you need to keep doing what you're doing." And I told her, I said, "We will meet again." And she says, "Oh, we most certainly will." And sure enough, I went in to check her a couple of times during the night, and she was no longer coherent, and she ended up passing. I was off the next night, but she ended up passing at around 10 something. And I could feel her saying, "I made it home." Her parents came and collected her. And that was just one, for instance, but there's another one that was even more profound. And I had a patient that was actually blind. I had only had her for 3 weeks. She was actively declining on my wing, and I'm sitting at the nurse's station, and she has a son and a daughter. The son and the daughter come up to me, and they say, "Mom's talking to people in the room that aren't there." So I'm like, okay, well, let me come down with you and see if there's something that I can do to make her, more comfortable. And when I walked into the room, she was reaching up, like reaching for something very delicately, like snowflakes. I mean, that's how delicate she was taking them. Now, keep in mind, this woman's blind. She's been blind for 10 years, and she's reaching for these things, and she's grinning from ear to ear. And I'm going to call her Edna. And I said, "Edna," I said, "who's here?" She says, "George." And her daughter almost passed out because George was her husband, and her husband had passed away, about 10 years, no, she'd been blind for 14 years. It was 10 years. So she's like, "Well, that's my dad, and he died 10 years ago." And then all of a sudden she says, "And he's very, very happy that you're taking good care of Pixie." Well, Pixie was her poodle. Her son had to take Pixie, who was still alive and at his house and about 14 years old, and had to take Pixie to take care of the dog. And he turned as white as a sheet. And he says, "Do you think she's hallucinating?" And I said, "Well, do you think she's hallucinating?" He says, "I don't know, but this is kind of freaky." And I said, "Well, let's just try something." I said, "Edna, can I ask George something?" And she kind of, she nodded. And I said, "George, what color is your son's shirt?" She says, "Yellow." He was wearing a pastel yellow Ralph Lauren polo shirt. And he's like, "Hi, Dad." So many people.
Wow.
Yes. And she was blind, Yes. So many people miss a very, very beautiful time where they can also communicate with the other side themselves. You can learn more from a child under age 5 and a person who's dying if you just listen, because that area is opened. They're able to hear telepathically. As their hearing on our side declines, it kind of opens up for that, but they're able to hear the telepathic communication going between them and the other side, as well as they can hear you. So a lot of times, how many times have you heard somebody say, "I just wish that I could tell somebody that I love them one more time," or tell them I'm sorry, or, ask Uncle Bob what he did with the clock, or anything like that. And this is your chance to do that. You can ask, they can hear you the same way as I'm communicating with you now, but you can't hear them. So they can communicate through the person that is transitioning, and people don't realize, and a lot of times they miss out on that because they're grieving so much. And another thing too, the other side is considered the fifth dimension. You've got that odd fourth dimension in between, and we're on the third. A lot of times when people are very, very emotional, the spirit guides and spirits will kind of hesitate in coming in too close because they're at a higher vibration, and it can increase the emotions. So, if you've got somebody in the room that's acutely crying, you may not get the answer that you're looking for. But if you can ask for a private moment with that person, and you're okay with asking questions and not freaking out when you actually get an answer, and, oh my God, he answered, he's really here in the room type thing, then you can do that. And more people, I think people, if they realize that, and that they would have less grief. I really, really do. So,
yeah, it helps. Having just gone through the experience that I did, and I still agree with him, but I do absolutely believe he's there. He's in a better place, and is with loved ones. Actually, leading up to it, in the months leading up to us finding out that my father had cancer, and he declined quickly after we found out.
Yeah.
But we had visitations. We had a guest, another psychic was on our show back in October, and he's like, I see your grandfather behind you, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, my mother's father, my father's father. He's like, oh, your father's father, for sure. Whom I've met once in my life, by the way. And sure enough, I kind of followed up on that. And I do think he was around. It was like some of the family members came and they visited me before they maybe helped him across. I don't know. It seemed to be a phenomena.
Yeah, they are around. They are around ahead of time. I mean, sometimes even as much as a year ahead of time. You'll hear loved ones talking about seeing people, or even just on that day, but they are around. They are preparing. They are creating a reception. When I saw my mother cross over and she was beaming and she was no longer in pain, in the moment, I almost wanted to jump into the picture just for the day, you know what I mean? And say, hey, I want to come too, but yet I didn't want to stay because I have children. So, but to see her beaming and to know that she was okay and to know where she was going was such a relief, because sometimes with grief, you wonder, did they go somewhere else, or whatever. But to get to actually see her and how overjoyed she was. I mean, to me, to see her like that, I couldn't grieve that her joy, you know what I'm saying? So, and plus she's still around me so much. I hear all the time, I found one of her white long hair. She's been gone for 7 years. I found one of her white long hairs on a chair at the dining room table. I'm still finding white hairs all over the place that are hers.
I was going to ask you about that. I don't know if you know anything about apports, but I was wondering if that could be classified as an apport.
That's like an apport, right?
Right. It could be, and I haven't really read up a lot on apports, but the little bit that it could be. I mean, because there's no way that those hairs could get there by themselves. I've moved twice.
The binder.
What's that?
The binder, especially that. There's no answer for that at all. So,
yes, and again, they're comforting. With your brother, when you feel ready, you can ask him to leave a symbol of something. You can leave out some, some people, once they've been over long enough, they can actually move pictures in your house and stuff, so
energy to do that.
Yes, exactly. So you can ask him to leave something, a symbol, of something, a ladybug, a squirrel, pick something.
That's your spirit animal there.
That's my spirit animal.
Would be squirrel.
Is it? There you go.
No, not really. It's my brain. My brain is
squirrels and things. That's what we say.
Yeah, that's what I call it. I squirrel.
Oh, but, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you about another thing. I didn't have a chance to about. You said about the cord when you look up when you're in between. I was just wondering, it does sound like, and a lot of people say this, that it's like birth and you have to cut the the umbilical cord. God, that wouldn't come out right. So it's the same thing as in
an umbilical cord. And people also say
the cord.
An astral projection. They say that a lot of times they see a cord going back to the body.
Yes.
I never saw that cord myself, but a lot of people report that, and you see that in a lot of the artwork of that sort of thing.
Well, and everything is individual, but we all have one. So, it may be more obvious to some people than others, but those that lose their way, it kind of has a little bit of a disconnect, like it hovers above them, if that makes sense.
It does.
Because they're not supposed to be here anymore. You know what I'm saying? So it helps them to cross over. And also those souls that get stuck in that fourth dimension, people that have had that have the ability to talk to deceased people on the other side have made mention that it sometimes seems like they're almost on medication, and even the visual is somewhat blurry. It's just like there's a haze, not even really a haze. Can't think of a way to describe it, but it's like looking through handy wrap. Even though it's clear, there's still a little bit of distortion visually. So it's not a real comfortable place for people to be in. Plus, sometimes there's some creepy things that are stuck there too, because there are portals in the fourth dimension that are used by other beings. So, it's not a fun place for them to be. So,
just like to say a real quick hello to Liz Milne, Sandy Griffith, Rachel, and Bob Burnell, and everybody in the audience. If you guys have any questions for Lynn, just post them and we'll put them up.
Yeah, and I just want to let you guys know that, of course, my computer's having a breakdown, literally.
So, it's on its last leg. It would seem.
So I'm having a hard time with the comments. So just have Chris put them up for us.
So
there was another thing I wanted to ask you about the dimensions. What are your opinions on the dimensions? Like, how do you classify them?
We're on the third dimension. The other side is the fifth dimension, and then there's that gray area of the fourth dimension in between. From
what's the first and third?
I know we are on the third.
We're in the third.
The first and second.
World.
I'm sorry.
And
I haven't really delved into that one that much, but I do. I haven't really delved into the first and second, so I really don't know that much about the first and second. I mostly know about the third, fourth, and fifth.
What sort of differences do you see in the greater dimensions than the third? Sorry.
Pardon me?
What sort of differences do you see in the greater dimensions than the third? Like what constitutes the fourth?
Well, like we're here in human form functioning on a third level, that it's more solid. Everybody's in human form and bodies. On the other side, they don't need the body, to walk around and do things. And they're very busy over there too. It's interesting that when people pass away, there's more to just having that initial meeting with your loved ones at a reception. From there, you do go on to a life review, and you end up punishing yourself for some of the things that you've done. You are left with the emotions at that time to feel the good and the bad, of what you've done and what the person actually felt at the time. So be careful about laying the horn on the little old lady going 40 miles an hour on the interstate ramp trying to get on, because she might just be saving your life 10 miles down the road. So say thank you or pass them. And you're going to get to feel how rattled you made her. And then you're going to feel bad because you realize what a favor she did for you. But the fourth dimension is kind of an area that is stuck. There, demons are there. They travel through there. I believe that aliens also use that. Bigfoot uses those as shields and interdimensional traveling as well. And the fifth dimension is what most people call home or heaven. It's where the Akashic or Akashic records, however you want to say it, are. Mm-hmm. And you do have that review that I had mentioned. You also get to see the Akashic records. They will let you choose to go one place that you've never been to before that maybe you wanted to, like if you want to go to Australia, they'll kind of take you there so that you can see it. So you do get to choose that, which was something that was interesting that I found out through my mom.
Wow.
And but once you're there, there's schooling if you need it. After you review, you walk through the Acacia records and see all of the opportunities that you missed. There is sometimes some schooling, and then from there you go other places, and do other things. There's just so much detail to it. I'm actually, working on that chapter right now about that. And, some people are hybrids, some people they believe that they're from planets elsewhere, and they are. So, that's kind of like where they're the receiving area. And then from there, they go off to where they originated from or where they're supposed to go to next. And we never die. We are eternal. We're cyclical. We come back to this earth or other earths in other universes, and that's what I mean by going off, into other areas to help people, to school, to correct mistakes that we've made, and that sort of thing. After we leave this physical body, it's literally like, pardon me?
Our meat bags. That's what Chris and I call them.
Exactly. And, people have said, too, that have had near-death experiences. My father had one. They talk about being sucked out of the body. It's kind of a feeling of being sucked out, some people have said, or kind of pushed out, because they say, well, what does it feel like to leave your body? And it's like, well, 1 minute you're heavy, then you're sucked out and you're weightless. So, and that sort of thing. And I wanted to make mention, too, about sudden death, if you want to hear about that as well.
Sure.
The difference between a natural death and a sudden death is, of course, that one is natural and one is sudden. However, with the sudden death, they don't have the reception and all of the people. At first, they do get it, but afterwards, they have to understand that they've died. And it would be overwhelming if all of a sudden, they pass over and they're in this, family reunion. So they have to realize that they have passed away. Sometimes they go through a period of confusion. They go through a period of even bargaining, trying to, deny that they're dead, trying to bargain to stay alive. Those sorts of things happen. Which reminds me, I'm going to write down suicide because that's a question that people often ask about. And I do have the answer for that, but I don't want to forget to answer that one. So sudden death, it kind of catapults them out of their body. Some people remember who've had near-death experiences, which is completely different. You can see their body being worked on and things like that. Mm-hmm. Well, these don't get the option to re-enter. When my daughter was 4 years old, we were coming down the road. We had come upon a gas station that was on the corner, and it was taped off because a tanker that was coming to leave gas at a gas station had kind of pulled across two lanes, and a car had gone underneath the tank. Oh. And so we're sitting there stopped, and my daughter says to me, she says, "Mommy, who's the man with ketchup on his face?" I'm like, "What man with ketchup on his face?" And I look back, it's nighttime too, and I look back, I don't see anything, but then out of my peripheral vision, as I'm turning, I see this man standing at her window. He's frantic, and he's got blood all over his face. Oh, and then he kind of left there and went on down to some other cars. So, and lo and behold, in the news, there was a man that died in that accident that evening. So they have to find someone to help stabilize. My sister, who was murdered, that was also, a sudden death. And this is another thing too. Once they pass away, they can be 6 places simultaneously at one time, which is interesting. So when she was murdered, we all ended up at my mother's house. My sister's spirit ended up at my mother's house. I remember sitting in her bedroom and feeling her saying, "Get out of my room. What are you doing in my room?" Because she still hadn't digested all of what had happened. And I remember saying out loud to her, I said, "Robin, there's been a tragedy. You're no longer living. You need to find someone, to help you cross over you need to find someone. And she, her energy was kind of confused. And we were there for a little while with my brother and family. We were, coming together with the shock of finding out that she was gone. And as I was leaving my mother's house, I gave my mom a hug, and I see out of my peripheral vision my sister standing right next to her with her arms out, wanting a hug. I just walked right past her, and she looked so hurt. I remember even at the time I had asked my ex-husband to turn around and go back because I felt guilty. I wanted to go back and hug her or at least acknowledge her. But my brother and my sister-in-law were very, very avid. They were a bit gung-ho about their religion, and it would not have made a very comfortable situation for my mother. Probably would have ended in a screaming match. But anyway, so we went ahead and went home. And that night, my sister showed up at the foot of my bed. She was with my great-grandmother, so she had connected and found someone. That same night, she also showed up at the side of my brother's bed. And this time they had a man with them and my grandmother and my sister. And my brother said that he felt that the man was familiar to him, not from this lifetime, but he somehow felt that this man helped guide him with his talents in some way. And he actually reached out to try to touch where they were. My sister and my great-grandmother were just standing there smiling. And when he touched the field that they were in, the whole room just burst with light and filled up with light, and then they were gone. And then the following night, she showed up next to my mother's bed with my grandmother to let everyone know that she had connected with someone and that she had made it the other side. Now, once they do that, then they get the reception. They get to connect with people that they left behind before they came here. They get to connect with people that they've known from this lifetime that are on the other side, and they get that whole reception thing and go through the life review and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
You have a question on the screen. How old were you when you realized you have gifts?
Was it when you saw as a child, you saw the people from the hospital in your house?
Yeah. I mean, I was probably like 2 or 3 years old. I didn't know they were gifts. I just thought that it was, it was a norm to have these people in patient gowns and Indians walking through our house. My sisters and brothers were seeing them too. So, yeah.
Liz says, I'm so sorry to hear about your sister, Lynn. RIP, my condolences, Liz Milne says.
Thank you so much.
You and your family. A part B to that question about gifts, you mentioned your daughter saw the victim of the car accident. Do you think psychic abilities are genetic in some way?
I think that all children have the ability to see because they've come so recently from the other side. I don't think that they are afraid of seeing ghosts, except for the ones that don't cross over, that still have their wounds and things showing. They're a little bit creepy. But I think that being afraid and denying your ability is a learned behavior, not so much a natural behavior. I think everybody has the ability to do it if they nurture it. And a lot of times, parents are afraid of the worst thing you can tell your kid if they're telling you that they see something more than once, or they have something that they're playing with their invisible friend, and their invisible friend, starts to tell them to do concerning things. Instead of telling them there's nothing there, well, they can clearly see it. You can't, but that doesn't mean it's not there. You need to ask them, is it scaring you? And is it asking you to do things that you're not supposed to? Because then you've got more of a demon thing on your hand than a friend. And the last thing that you should do is also tell them that it's their guardian angel. Because if it was Aunt Lulu coming to their foot of their bed at night, it wouldn't be scaring the bejesus out of them. It would be a very warm welcome meeting for them with that person. But so many parents are like, oh, there's nothing there. There's no such thing as ghosts. I mean, how often have you heard that? My parents did that, but I never did that to my children. And my daughter, who was the one that saw the man with ketchup on his face, in that story with the haunted house that I went through with that, she was the one that went downstairs while we were there with the realtor and saw the things downstairs in that house when she came back up to me and said, "No, Mommy, I don't like this house." And I'm sure you remember that part of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And to this day, she still is able to, she has, all of my children have gifts, but it's because they've never been stopped from having them. They have had boundaries put on them. This isn't something that you go to school and talk about in the playground.
Right.
So that sort of thing.
Right.
That was in your first book. I just wanted to let everybody know that, Omnipresent, where Lynn dives into basically everything that you've done and seen and heard, and your children were involved. And it's just an amazing, incredible, but yet scariest story I think I've ever read.
Wow.
Really?
It was awful.
Yeah, it was awful.
It was awful. I would not ever wish that on anybody, but but I'm so thankful that the young man was released from that house. Maybe that was my purpose in there. Pardon me?
The man that was hung, right?
Yes, he was released, and maybe that was my purpose to be there. Maybe I became so desensitized to them at that point. Not that I wanted to live and spend the night and have them crawling in my bed. No. But I became so desensitized seeing them that it also helps me with my ability now. I can now help remove archons from people's backs, those Lux attachments that they have in front that look like cow necks that are bags. The archons look like spiders or crabs to me, sometimes reptilian, and they attach to people's backs. I suspect that those are even attachments, and I could tell you some stories about mental illness and being in a psychiatric ward.
Oh, sure.
The nerves.
Well, that's kind of where I was going to go with things, but actually you mentioned archons on the last show, and it's a name I'm not real familiar with. Like I hear it used once in a blue moon. Mm-hmm. Can you tell our audience what the archon is and how that works?
The archon is a sort of very, very negative attachment. Some people believe that there are certain galactic forces that bring them here and leave them to attach. Other people believe that they're a form of negativity that's a kind of elemental or demonic attachment. They look like spiders. They look like crabs. They do look reptilian. Sometimes they have a butt like a human. Other times they have a tail that kind of wraps around. Sometimes they have a combination of the two. They have these fingers that are shaped like a G, and they hook in underneath your armpit and at the top of your shoulder. And that's how they hold on so that their head can peek either way. And then they have the same thing that attaches on the tops of your hips. Now, the distinct thing between the archons and also the Lux attachments, which are the ones that come from the front, is they're and the spiders don't really have a head and the crabs don't either, but the reptilian looking one does. And the head is much, much smaller in comparison to the body. It's like the size of a softball, sometimes a baseball when they're the Lux ones, but when they're ones on the back about the size of a softball, and then you've got this huge backpack looking thing on their back. And the thing that's distinct about them is that they have a fin type thing that attaches at the top of their head, goes out and connects at the base of their head, and it's floppy. So when they turn and they're like hanging upside down or something, it flops over their face, or it kind of graduates down a little bit. It doesn't stand up firm like a shark fin, but they have those. A lot of times archons come along with addiction. I'm not picking on anybody, but I'm telling you, if you got an addiction, you got an archon, because they thrive on that. They thrive on the chaos that alcoholisms and drug addictions create and the rippling effect that it causes for the family. My brother, for instance, had an issue with alcohol and cocaine, and he had an archon. He went through a period of time where he went through rehabilitation and was able to get rid of it. However, it never left. Whenever my brother was even thinking, he lived in Florida, I live in South Carolina. Whenever he was even talking to his wife about coming up to visit me in South Carolina, his archon would precede him. And that thing, it would go from the corners of the ceiling, it would jump diagonal corners corner to corner to corner. It never really came below like halfway on the wall, and it would be up on the ceiling, and it was like a frog almost sticking to the ceiling because his was reptilian, and it would turn its head all the way around, and that's why that flap thing would cover its face sometimes. And I would say to my kids would see it too, and I said, your brother's planning on coming to visit. Lo and behold, the next day I would get the call that they were coming up that weekend or something. And of course, they never stayed in my house, and I was glad. But once they would arrive, that archon would disappear because, of course, then it would go back home with him or go to the next place that he was going that would precede him. Now, the reason why they stick around, even though he overcame his addictions, he was clean until the day that he died for almost 30 years. The reason why they continue to remain is because they want to constantly taunt you or tempt you because they want to reattach. They need to reattach to live off of your energy. And so they're constantly around, still waiting for that chance to reattach to you. So, yeah. As a matter of
monkey on your back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because
literally.
the archon is on the back, and you said the lux. Is that Lux? Like,
yeah.
like
I believe it's Luxe. I'm not for sure, but the Lux one actually hangs. You know those monkey toys with the Velcro arms that kids have that they put over their head, and the monkey hangs down in front?
Yeah.
It kind of is like that, but it kind of drapes like a cowl neck, only lower. And the head of it actually, what I have seen, as a matter of fact, and I didn't put this in the book, and I probably should have, but I was creeping people out so bad. I wanted them to get to know me first, to know that I'm not psycho. When Ellen, the lady that got clawed to the point of bleeding in my haunted house in my book, when we left, she was sitting in the front seat next to me, and I saw a Lux attachment on her, and it was almost glowing neon green in my peripheral vision, and its head was like a newborn baby in one of those pouch things that couldn't hold up its head. Its head was flopping backwards because it didn't have any support, and that thin thing was on it. And see, at that time, I didn't know what that was. And now since then, I've learned that, and I'm like, oh, no wonder, what that was. And they will literally suck the life out of you. If you leave them on you, they make you not feel good. You can go to the doctor. The doctor can't find anything wrong, but yet you're exhausted, or you're drained, or you're having congestion in front with the Lux beings. And, some people have them on them for multiple lives. Some people can have them, and sometimes their family, because also addiction sometimes runs in families also. So, it attaches, or they create new ones.
Yeah. It also makes you wonder about some of those diseases that they have trouble really diagnosing or, proving, like fibromyalgia and some other ones.
Exactly. And when I did my rotation, when I went back to school, as I had mentioned, I was placed I had to do a rotation through a psych class. I had to go through a psychiatric ward and monitor patients in there. So the day that we went, there were about 8 student nurses and the teacher, and we went into this one area. It was the intake area, and people were coming in. They were combative. So there was this one girl in particular that came up, and she pointed at me and she said, "You can help me. I know you can." And of course, she's kind of slurring her words because she's been heavily medicated. And I'm like looking around because I didn't want to be, Lynn, the person that's going to come and pick your demons off. I just wanted to be a nurse that day, So the teacher came forward and she said, "Don't make eye contact. Don't make eye contact with anybody." They kind of ushered us out into another area, into another room. But then a nurse and I got reassigned to that area. We wanted to go back in there. And we actually had to sign papers that if we got hit or injured in any way, that we wouldn't hold the hospital responsible. So we were in there. They actually had wooden picnic tables that were bolted down to the floor. And the nurse and I were sitting there together. We were doing our charting. Our patients had gone to their counseling session with their psychiatrist or whatever it was they were doing. And the young girl comes over and she sits down and she starts telling us her story. She had been molested at 10 years old by their minister until she was 14, and then her mother got remarried, and then the stepfather molested her until she was 16, and she finally ran away. And then she started to get involved with satanic worship, which she then realized wasn't for her and wasn't the right thing to do either, which is, what she was talking about. But as she's sitting there, I'm looking at her, and she has these claw marks all over her. She had on a tank top with spaghetti straps. So I could see her back. I could see her chest, her upper arms. She had one coming out of her ear, her nose. And she was talking about the fact that she could hear 25 different voices. So, but I'm looking at her and I'm like, oh my God, those look just like the claw marks my friend Ellen got in my haunted house.
Right.
So, and I'm like, because, and if anybody has not ever seen a demonic scratch, they appear like a cat scratch, one single scratch. They can be any length, but they have that thickness in the middle and it tapers towards the ends, and they do bleed. They welt and they bleed. They kind of bleed, and they leave scabs that kind of look like what I used to call chiggers in Florida. They were these little bugs that left these, so they look like sewing stitches. So, and they can also be more solid. But she had them, and she said to me, and I have one with a long fingernail that scratches the inside of my vagina. And of course, they were blaming her, claiming that she was doing this to herself. But there were areas on her back that she had these claws. She couldn't have reached at all herself, that way. So we're sitting there. The young woman is now called away for her counseling session. She gets up, she starts to walk away. And as she's walking away, I'm looking at her and I see this pillowcase sized, to me, it looked like there wasn't really a bag, but if you had taken a clear bag and filled it with potatoes, it looked like a clear bag over each of her shoulders, that big, with these misshapen heads. I mean, sometimes they were inverted and the eyes were on the bottom and the mouth was on top, and they looked like they were all clustered in there, one over each shoulder. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, she really is hearing 25 voices. She's got attachments on her back. So she left and she came back. At the time, I was taking care of my mother who was dying of cancer. I was going through a divorce. I didn't feel spiritually and physically strong enough to take something on that huge myself. So I went to her room and I told her, I said, listen, I'm telling you this in confidence. If you want to tell on me, you can. I was thinking anyway, they'd think she was crazy and wouldn't believe it. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And I told her, I said, listen, you've got attachments on your back. You really are hearing 25 voices, and you need to find someone to help you with that when you get out of here. And I just had this overwhelming feeling because when she turned, I could see it looked like a twisted vine, horn-like vine at the top of her shoulder that, of course, went under her arm. And I just reached out and took it on underneath each shoulder, and I pulled the things off. And I was actually surprised at how easily they came off. They were literally more like clustered together like grapes. Some of them fell to the ground. I was trying to stomp them into the ground the best that I could. And I could still see that she had some around her bed. And I told her, I said, listen, this is only the beginning. These things can reattach whatever I haven't been able to stomp in. So when you get out of here, you need to find someone that can help you remove these attachments.
Yeah, most definitely.
So do you think in the cases of addiction and mental illness, that would you say most cases, all cases, no cases are due to like a spiritual attachment?
Well, I don't know if it's because of the spiritual attachment, but the spiritual attachment definitely encourages the addiction to continue on, makes it harder to quit. So, and I'm not trying to tell people what to do. A glass of wine with dinner is one thing, but the whole bottle is another. You know what I'm saying? So, people, if they have an addiction, I would guarantee that they have an archon. When I continue to... Huh?
Just one bottle, it's okay.
Well, not like every night, I mean, you have to be reasonable.
No, I hear you. There's a lot of people are, invested in this spiritual release therapy or spirit release therapy. I think it was William Baldwin. Edith Fiore is another person who has books on that. I have one of those, The Unquiet Dead. Terrence Palmer is another guy that talks about that. And it's an interesting thing because they believe that most mental illnesses really can be attributed to spiritual attachments.
Especially Terrence Palmer. He's
Yes.
opening a hospital for that.
Wow, that is amazing. I would love to be part of that, because when I walked, after seeing that on this young woman that day, we were in different psychiatric wards for the whole week. So I started looking at people differently, and I started looking to see whether they had attachments or not. And 85% of the people that I ran across there that were diagnosed with schizophrenia had attachments.
Wow.
And to go forward a year from that point, I was in Walmart. I'm in the aisle. I'm squatted down picking something up, and there are these two young girls in the aisle towards the end, and they keep looking at me, and I'm like, what the hell? Do I have toilet paper on my shoe? So I overhear the one girl saying to the other one, I know that's her. And so I thought, oh, well, maybe they've read my book, So the girl comes over to me and she said, hi. She said, are you, well, my name. And I said, yes. And I'm looking at her and she's kind of familiar, but not completely. And she says, you were the nurse that came to me and told me about the attachments on my back. And I did what you said. My God. I mean, she was almost gray when I saw her in the unit there. She was now pink. She had lost weight. She had on makeup. She looked beautiful. She was very much alive. She was vivacious. And she was going to school to become a dental hygienist. So she was sharing this with me, and she said, I want to thank you. She says, now I'm only on medication for some mild anxiety, and I'm off of all of my schizophrenic medication.
Wow.
So she did go and have the rest of that removed. She did what I said, and I was so proud of her. So, it was nice getting to be able to see the end result that of how it could have gone for her if she hadn't, seeing her in that position, it would have just paralleled worse. But she did do, what I had made mention to her. And with that being said, she came back and was much, much better that way.
That's great. Natalie Mosley has a question for you. She's asked, can the archons attach to animals? I removed an entity once and with a tiny head and a humped body and really long spidery limbs that was sitting on and attached to a horse.
Yes. But it's not that they attach so much to the horse, because of course, but someone who has been around the horse or someone that has been in the proximity of the horse. I mean, sometimes like the spider-like ones, they can zing somebody in a grocery store. You know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden you come home, you got, you've got this little thing kind of attached to you, but not completely. And oftentimes they just fall off. But in the case of your horse, it was probably brought in from someone that was human, because normally they don't attach to animals, they attach to humans, but they can attach to an animal that could create an issue for someone. Let's say someone gets on the horse rears, the person falls back and hits their head, that is targeted. It's not the animal that's targeted, it's the person that's targeted.
And nobody can talk to a horse, of course.
Of course.
Yes, exactly, Mr. Ed. That's right.
Sandy says, I think the medical field and spiritual field should unite. And then she goes on to say, at least collaborate. Totally agree.
I absolutely agree. If they were to have somebody that was some form of spiritualist that could actually see interdimensionally when they go through these admissions with these people, especially in the mental, the psychiatric wards, instead of just the doctor and the social worker and the nurse type thing, that there would be a lot less patients in psychiatric wards, but then they'd have to take on a very gray area that they would be very uncomfortable with, which is removing them.
Right.
And all of that goes with it. And they can't do that. And anybody that can, they think is nuts. So, we don't think they're nuts because we know, but I'm just saying they're, in the medical field that it is more that way. But I wanted to mention something too about addictions. Also, something that people don't realize is when as I had mentioned before, when people pass away, they have the choice of either crossing over or staying earthbound. And a lot of times when they stay earthbound, as I mentioned, their cause of death always shows actually, even if it's something internal, it'll show like a Swiss cheese or a whirling appearance. Mm-hmm. They still have their addictions. They still have their emotions. And a lot of times what people don't realize is when they're on their cigarette break or they're having their drink in the pub, after work nightly before they go home, how many dead people are actually standing around them trying to get a whiff of that alcohol and cigarette. And that's one thing too, when we pass away, we keep our senses. We still smell, we still hear, we still see. So, if they could see all of the rotting dead people standing around them, they probably wouldn't want to be there in that place anyway.
Right.
Some of them are pretty.
It's full night in a bar, and it's really not. It's full of dead people. Like The Shining.
Yeah.
I love that scene in The Shining when Jack's at the bar.
Really? I see. I've never seen The Shining, so.
Yeah. It's a haunted bar scene because they're, in the hotel, of course, and it's just the family in the hotel, and he goes to the bar and there's a bartender and there's people in the bar, but they're of course all dead. Now, having your experience that you had, are you afraid to watch? Does it bother you to watch horror movies?
It doesn't, because first of all, I don't watch TV. I don't have time. I had my last baby at 46, so I've got a 13-year-old at home, and up until 2 years ago, everything had to be G-rated on the first floor. So, and even now, there are those restrictions, and all we have is Disney and Netflix. So the thing about it is when I watch, like, for instance, if I watch like a ghost hunting show or something like that, it's more of a, yeah, I know what that is. That happened to me, type thing. And I can relate to what they're experiencing. It's like one group went into the home where Sharon Tate was murdered, and they had one of those boxes that you could hear her voice on. And the thing that just broke my heart about that, and you can go back and listen to it if ever you get the chance, if you can find it, you can hear her voice saying, "Please, please take me to the light." And she says it over and over. And you can hear it clearly that she's saying that. But no one helps her over to the light. She was asking for the assistance. So, wow. So things that's like, sad. What's that?
I said that's sad. It
is very sad, and it just, but
time we encountered that ourselves, we encountered a child spirit. He identified himself as Toby, and he was kind of, whimpering through the spirit box and into our recorders, and it was sad. And we did try to cross it, with little knowledge we have of doing that. We think we were successful. Each time we visit this location, we would always get the same voice. And then when we went back
the same answers.
Yeah, same answers. How old are you? They always say 7. We have a podcast about that. And when we went back, after trying to cross, we couldn't talk to him anymore. He didn't come through, so we think he crossed. So what steps do you take to remove a demon, to help them cross, or what do you do to get them off somebody's back in Archon?
I walk up and I pull them off.
Are they like leeches, like pulling a leech off?
When I pull them off of someone's back, they feel that they say it's like grass being pulled out of their back. Yep. And I usually move very, very, very swiftly when I do it, because of course it'll get down on the ground and start running around if you don't immediately start to stomp it or, to direct it into a direction. Usually I will do it outside because I don't want it in my house. I make sure there's salt in front of the door, or wherever the thing is at. But it's an etherical thing, and they have a scent to them too. There's a smell to some of them that smells like rotting decay or even sulfurish sometimes, like demons. Mm-hmm. So, and that's there too. But when I shift my visual field to look at things interdimensionally, which most of the time I don't do it on purpose, it just happens, but it doesn't happen all the time, but when I purposely shift to do it, that I can see them, I can, like with that girl with the attachments on her back, I could see where it was connected, and I I went with what I felt, and I had this overwhelming urge to just pull them off of her. And I felt something stronger and mightier than me coming through to help me in that moment, to help that girl. So, yeah.
So you actually put your hands up,
yeah,
and grasp where you see them psychically and pull.
Yes, and pull them off, and pull them off.
An extra power with you, like an angelic power, maybe.
Yes, I believe that we all have guides. We all have. Somebody asked me once if we have guardian angels, and the answer is yes, we do. But we've got multiple ones, and they come in for different things that we need. So yes, but sometimes, I have help from the other side too, that way my mother, my parents, and of course the angels and things come close. And then I pray, I pray to have the assistance and to not have it come home with me or not attached to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one time that I pulled one off in my house, and it was running around my house for 2 weeks before I could finally get it out. So,
oh my goodness.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to mention earlier, and I don't know if this is just the microphone or what, but it sounded, we heard a couple of different voices.
Yeah.
Through the interview, kind of.
I wouldn't be surprised. I that as well yesterday when I was on with the lady I was on an interview with a lady in Scotland, and she was saying too that she heard things, and yeah. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad. I feel okay, but
yeah, then
we can go back and listen to it later.
But No, that happens.
And then let me know, and send it to me. And point it out, because I want to hear it too. I want to make sure.
A couple of times, I wasn't sure because the mic was moving a little bit, but then it was kind of like a voice in there.
Yeah, that's it. It's the
mic. At least
mic.
a few times I heard something that sounded more like a voice than anything.
Yeah, they're doing.
I'm not sure what it said.
Well, I definitely want to hear it too, and make sure that it's it's a light entity and not a dark one. Because sometimes when you do this kind of things, you get curious things following you.
Well, look what happened in the beginning when we were trying to get on and we were going to go live, and it's taken off your phone and the camera and everything else. So, and you said you had problems with the lady of Scotland as the interview is also as well. So,
right. Something else on a lighter note, if I may share, when people are also passing, as I had mentioned, that you can get so much information from a person who is dying as well as children. There have been a couple of cases that I've been a witness to where when they're in that rallying stage and they've come back, I had a patient one time that was actively passing. Her daughter, it wasn't her daughter, it was her niece was in the room. She was her aunt. And she said to her niece, I mean, sometimes they know, they see spirits coming that are also waiting to come in. In this particular case, she said to her niece, she said, when are you going to have those 2 little girls? And the niece is like, I don't have any children. Her husband and her, they'd been trying for 25 years. She was in her middle 40s and in menopause. And she says, no, you're holding one of these little girls in each arm. She says, I hope I get to see those little girls before I go home to Jesus. And the niece told her, she said, I'm sorry. She said, that would be nice, but that's not going to happen. So the aunt passed away. Oh, wait, no, just to back up. About 2 days before she passed away, I was in there because we had hospice come in, and she was still kind of in and out. She was rallying, and the niece was in there. And as she comes back, and she says, oh, no, those two little girls are yours. So she passes away. About 6 months later, the niece's uncle and also her father were also staying at the facility at different levels of care. And her uncle had surgery and was on the unit on the other hallway for about a week. And I see her walk in 6 months later, and she's got a baby bump. And lo and behold, she was pregnant with 2 little girl identical twins at 45 years old. I had another client who, it was her daughter, and she was saying, there's a little boy here calling me grandma. And she's like, well, I'm an only child. I've never been married. She didn't have a boyfriend at the time. She was very happy living on her own, and she was close to 50 years old. And she said, I don't know who that is. And she says, oh, no, he's calling me grandma. And she would keep talking about the little boy that would be talking to her and referencing her as grandma almost the whole day. So lo and behold, after she passed away, this woman had met someone whose spouse had passed away the same day that her mother did. And they made friends, just friends, for about a year. Finally, he asked her out. They had a wonderful time. They got married. And she felt that she had mono or something. She didn't feel very well. She went to the doctor at 50 years old and found out that she was pregnant, and it was a healthy baby boy. Wow. So, these things that they can tell you ahead of time. And, so many times too, people, they say, an event happens and they're like, oh, well, I wish so-and-so could be here to see this, or I wish whatever. They're there. They're preparing to go to the weddings, the graduations, the football games, the award day, all of those things they are aware of, and they're preparing to show up to those things even before we are. And 99.9% of the time, if there's an empty chair, there is somebody sitting in it. It's just not somebody human, because they like their own seats. They don't like sit on top of people like the Disney ride that sits the ghost right on top of the person in the middle. They don't do that.
Go through that like 18 times when I was a kid.
Did you?
That was my favorite part.
Yeah. That was actually my favorite part too. And sometimes too, they'll come in and they'll do a bleachering effect up in the corner when there are so many of them, that are coming in to arrive to watch those things. And, I can see them. And other people can see them too sometimes. And it's probably a blessing that most other people cannot, because then it would take away from the day of, say, the bride coming down the aisle or something. They'd all be so busy turned around backwards looking at the angels that they would be missing out on the beautiful event, the life event, that they're there. But be reassured that they are, in fact, there. So
I love the story about the children, because that is something we've heard before. And like time and time again, people will say children pick their parents.
Yes, they do.
To actually see that, and they were hanging around before the actual pregnancy. That's amazing. That's wild.
Yes, that's true, and it is. And I actually witnessed that myself. You know what I'm saying? What you're saying too, and I was in the room when I'm overhearing this, and lo and behold, I actually ran into the second lady in the grocery store, about 2 years later, and here she's got this little kid in the in the front of the buggy, and she's walking along with this man, and I'm like, oh, what a cute baby. I didn't imagine that it was hers, even though it looked a lot like her, and then so she told me the story of what happened, and so it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. So yeah, I really hope that this book does take the stigma of death and dying away, that people take that opportunity of that window when Grandma's talking about Uncle Bob sitting in the corner, not to freak out and run and say, oh, get the meds, she's hallucinating again. Maybe, as long as she's comfortable and not suffering in pain, maybe it would be a better idea to sit for a minute and say to her, well, tell Uncle Bob I said hello. Well, Uncle Bob may respond, or can you ask Uncle Bob so-and-so? And then Uncle Bob will respond, because he can actually hear the question. Usually the response comes, almost before you finish the sentence. But, to give those people that opportunity to that one more time thing. So
I love that.
I wanted to ask you as well, before the show went live, we were talking about the last time you were on, and you said you saw a hand move our camera. First, you saw a man. That's what you thought behind me.
Yes,
but
I did.
We were having trouble with our camera as well for a little while. It would pan in and out. It would move on its own. We didn't know why. It's fine. It's stable. But you had said about a man behind me, and then you said today, you told us when you watched it back, you said it looks like a hand. It was where you're sitting. It went behind you towards Chris. It was walking, and I would say that the person was probably like 5'10", maybe. It wasn't overly, not like in the 6 foot area, maybe even a little bit shorter. But he went in the direction of Chris, and then that thing started blinking behind you. You had that blinking thing on the wall.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes, and it started blinking, and then you even mentioned, I believe, something at one point about it blinking. And then all of a sudden I see like a misting kind of in the corner where Chris is, like off to the side opposite of where you're sitting, Kristen. Mm. And I thought, well, there's some misting there. There's a spirit. There's a spirit in their room. But when I looked back over it, it looked more like a finger or a hand coming down over the lens. And it was funny because during that time, you had made mention about something in the room that was moving your camera by itself.
Yeah.
And
so was going off and the camera was panning almost every show for about a month.
Yeah.
But it doesn't do it anymore. Nothing has changed. It's just weird. So our audience knows the camera is like on a tripod. It's not touching our table.
Nothing.
It's by itself. We can't even kick it. We've tried to recreate it. And
sometimes too, their energy shifts and they have to rebuild on energy before they have the strength to do physical acts. Mm-hmm. And that's why too, with people, if ever, they're in the room with a spirit that's giving them goosebumps or making them feel uncomfortable or such, they know for a fact that it's a malevolent experience, spirit that they need to remain neutral. The negative entities feed off fear, sadness, depression. Fake it until you make it. Start singing in the room.
I love that.
I have to. This is so funny because I had a djinn. It looked just like one. I was actually on a show, and of course, sometimes they come close to hear what I'm talking about, and I could see it in the hallway looking at me. And after we finished, I stood up and I said, I want to teach you a class about love. Love, love, love. Come to me so that we can learn about love, because they don't have the ability to have that emotion. And they're very, very uncomfortable with it. And they will leave like there's a stench in the room, to haul-tail it. I mean, it was so shocked that I actually stood up and started, love, 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 love. I love you. I love God. I love da-da-da-da, type thing, that it literally was like shriveling and moving away as fast as it could, because most of the time when they approach, they're expecting that shock value. And when they don't, because they feed on it, and the more energy they can get off of you, the more physical acts they can do that are creepy. And when they don't get that, they can't amp up or energize up to do more things like, throw the TV across the room or hit you in the head type thing, So, so you keep them neutral, and they can't read your thoughts. And even if you're writing, they can only read Latin. They cannot read English. So you can pass notes to somebody about them, but just fake it until you make it and pretend like, I'll go around humming, the Amazing Grace, say the Lord's Prayer out loud, or even in your mind. It can be heard either way on the spiritual side of it. And don't give it that opportunity to amp up. So,
I see our friend Nathaniel J. Gillis is out there in the audience. Hey, buddy. He's a demonologist.
Demonologist.
And a good friend of ours. And one of the things he talks about a lot, and I wanted to get your take on this, was the incubi, succubi phenomena. Succubus. Sexual relations with these dark entities.
You know what? There is actually people, and forgive me because I know about the name of what this is called, that actually purposely have sex with those types of entities. And I mean, this goes way back into the 1700s, of how many paintings you've seen where there's the sleeping woman and there's the demon perched, at her bed. Yes, they can crawl in your bed and have sex with you. As a matter of fact, my next book coming out, which is an additional series to the next one after the next one, is a series that goes along with the Omnipresent. And it is about a story about a male ghost that was going, there were these townhouses, there were 10 of them, and they were all side by side, connecting. And he would go from place to place and pull down women's underwear in the middle of the night. I actually have a picture of this ghost, and he is the only ghost that I have ever seen in my life that shows and presents naked, because he's standing in the picture. He's got his hand over his Johnson. I'll be happy to share it with you. You can see it. I took the picture. They can't say that it's been photoshopped because I don't even know how to do that. I took it with my own camera. But he would go, and what happened is I was actually living there, so I have a whole nother haunted thing to write about. But of course, I had my house protected. I went out one morning. I was letting the dog out. The dog woke me up at like about 2:00 in the morning, and I just thought he had to go out. So I went to take the dog out, and our like 2 patios down from mine, I hear this girl kind of crying and mumbling on the phone, and she's like, "Oh, well, I gotta get off. My neighbor's out here on the phone." And she came over, and we started talking, and she says, "I think my apartment's haunted." And I said, "Well, why do you say that?" She started to tell me. She said, "I was laying in bed," and she said, "and I felt something tugging at my underwear." She says, "I wasn't asleep. I was just laying with my eyes closed." And she said at first she was frightened because she thought that a person had come into the house and was going to rape her because she felt the it coming up from behind. Yeah. And so she kind of, woke up, sat up, pulled her underwear back up, and then laid back down and pretended that she was asleep, and it started happening again. So with that being said, because I have a big mouth and I don't have a problem with going up to people and talking about ghosts, people are used to me, and most of the time they'll come to me with their story because they feel comfortable enough to express it. I started there were 5 women in that building that were single, either single mothers or girls that were college students that were single, and of course myself, and started talking to them, and all of them started making, I woke up one morning, I was in bed all by myself, and my underpants were all the way down around my ankles. They were talking about waking up like that and that they couldn't understand. And one of them even had made mention that she felt like something had been sexual with her because of the discharge that she had in her half pulled down underwear, that not like semen, but she was aroused by something, and they will arouse you that way. And so we started to put it all together, and so now they would come and get me. I think it's in my house. So I'd go over, and I'm like, oh my God, I'd take dragon's blood and all kinds of stuff, over there and tell it to leave. And of course it was a temporary thing because at that time I've since then have learned more effective means to clear things. But even when you clear a house, it's kind of like your house can be spotless, but the dust still continues to settle. So yes. Even though you've cleared everything, you still constantly have to follow through and do preventative work to keep the dust away, so to speak. But it matters on what you use. I think it matters with all our heart and intentions. Exactly. You don't need to light a candle and do this. Just
but if that's what something you think works or feel like works, then by all means, you're right.
Right. But I think it's more from the person itself. I mean, energy to energy. So
right. Exactly. And and the thing is the woman that actually had the effects in her underpants, she was an escort. So, that's kind of like ringing the dinner bell, you know what I mean, for something like that to approach. Not that it has the right to because of her choice of profession, but so she might have even brought that along with her when she moved into the apartment building. But it was very, very disturbing. And like I said, my next book is all about that building. What's that?
It was like a chew and screw, like they wanted to get dinner and
something like that. And she was probably mad that she didn't get her money. But anyway.
Was that a spirit of a discarnate person, or was that more of a demonic entity?
No, it was a person. I have a picture of him standing in front of this door. You can clearly see him, his legs. I'll send you the picture.
Okay.
I will send you the picture.
Yes, please.
And we had a question out there in the audience. Rachel Jones wanted to know, what do jinn look like?
The one that I saw to me, it reminded me of a little boxer-faced dog in the face, because they can appear differently. Some of them don't appear, they appear more human, but this one actually appeared more like a little bull dog face. And it was just the head that I saw peeking in with another one when I started doing my I love you. I love, 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 love. Let me send you love. God loves you. Everybody loves you kind of thing. It doesn't give them anything to build on that's negative so that they can, like I said, so that they can amp up and do physical acts. They want to come in and terrorize you because then they feed off of that.
Right. They feed off the energy.
So you're kind of killing them with kindness.
Yes.
Yeah. And they hate love. So, like I said, it's like a stink in the room. You start talking about love and that you want to share love with them and teach them around love. I mean, it sounds hilarious. It almost is funny. I don't want to say anything mocking because they do have an intelligence about them. And when my friend mocked them in the foyer of my house, she got clawed. So I don't want, what I'm saying? I want to do that. But I'm just saying, it was almost kind of a chuckle, to see the effects of that. It just came to mind to do it. It was the first time that I'd done it. Now, it wasn't permanent, that was at the time that I had removed that archon off of somebody's back and I was chasing it around my house for 2 weeks. So it was around that same time.
Thing scares me.
Wow.
The mental picture of that just scares the heck out of me.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, listen, you do what you got to do. I mean, it's in your house and you need to get it out. If you want to stand afraid of it, it's not going anywhere. So you need to do something about it.
We understand completely.
Otherwise, you never close your eyes to rest at peace or go to sleep.
Nope.
Right.
You always got that one eyeball open looking around,
Yes.
Or you sleep in shifts. I'll sit here while you sleep.
We've only got a few minutes left, but I wanted to touch on working those psychic abilities. You mentioned that, you can enhance these, you can work on them, you can focus. What would you recommend somebody who wants to see better, be more clairvoyant or clairaudient, whatever their gift may be, or combination of gifts?
Definitely start with meditation. Definitely start with meditation, connecting in with whatever source you believe in. Ask to have that assistance. That, to me, that's where it really starts for people that have never, ever done it before. You need to be able to silence your mind. If you can't silence your mind, you can't hear anybody anyway. So and most of the time our minds run around like 2-year-olds. So, you have to rein that in. Have you ever, even take a second here and try to think of nothing.
No.
Right.
You can't, because nothing starts coming in. It's impossible. But you have to practice to silence your mind. And you have to give that gap that opens to allow loved ones to speak to you, masters or guardians or whatever you believe in, to speak to you and come forward. Your mind, your head is so busy and so noisy, they can't, you can't hear them unless you have a still state or quiet.
That's why I like the hemisync, because it's like dual beats, and it tells you when you're meditating to put everything in this box, everything you're thinking about in the back of your head and the front of you, it doesn't matter, in a box, and try to do it that way. And that actually works. And then I like the sync itself, because I like the way it makes me feel later as well.
Well, that's it. And do you ever get any messages?
No. Well, I don't think so. No.
Not so much during it, but I think it helps you learn to quiet your mind to allow those messages or communications.
Mm-hmm.
It started heightening them. Yes.
Yeah. I had communications with that said grandfather that I mentioned earlier through doing meditation. And he showed me this whole thing. It was like a stream of thoughts, and I could see my father as a young man, and it was almost like watching an old time movie. It was really strange, but there it was, and it was all clear. I passed those messages on. I think he was saying that he was prouder of him than maybe he thought. So it was pretty good.
That's wonderful. See how gifted you are? See?
So we got
and you need to believe and not doubt that. And you said it was kind of freaky, but it's really wonderful,
Really intense.
Yeah, because it wasn't a bad experience. It was something very warm and loving.
It was good, yes.
Somebody
definitely
that
positive, nothing scary or spooky or anything about it.
Right.
It was
exactly.
Interesting.
Now your new book is Colors of Heaven.
Colors of Heaven, Beginnings Never End. But as I mentioned, I've recently had the file snatched from my computer by unknown sources.
Right.
Oh, it's
okay.
Right.
So this has happened before. Anybody that has written books on any kind of this, including the demonologist that's in the room, will probably tell you that this kind of thing happens. So, yeah, you definitely have to. I even sent it out, like I said, to my boyfriend, to my children for safekeeping. And like I said, when I went back to retrieve those after it was lost, the files were there, but there was nothing written on the page.
Blank pages.
All
in your
the pages.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But that's the second time it's happened.
You had this in the first book too, right?
The first book, right?
Yeah, the very first book, yes.
Which is Omnipresent.
Omnipresent.
Yes, and then there's Omnipresent, What Happened Next. And after I finish with The Colors of Heaven, I'm going to be doing another Omnipresent series book about the townhouse and what was gone through with all of those ladies getting their panties pulled down.
And where's the best place to get these books?
Amazon has my book, Omnipresent. It's everywhere, New Zealand, Africa. It's all over the world. However, the other two books and books continuing forward, I'm going to be selling from my website only. This will be the last book that I sell with Amazon for reasons. And Amazon has made a lot of money off of my book.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I have not.
I wanted to.
They're not doing it for free. Now that would be LynnMonet.com, right? And I'm sorry, I should have put this on the ticker earlier, but so people can get the spelling correct.
I also wanted to let everyone know that I sent Omnipresent to my mom, and she's a big, nonfiction, whatever, horror fan. But she kept calling me and asking me every day, "Is this real? And what happened to her children?" And so, as we were talking, I was telling Lynn the last time that she really, really liked the book, and Lynn was nice enough, sweet enough to send my mom a copy of Omnipresent too. And she absolutely loved it. She had you wrote a wonderful note inside to her and stuff, and she absolutely loves it.
I'm glad. Yeah, I actually addressed that to Kristen's mom.
Yes.
To Kristen's mom.
She did. She really did. It was funny. So cute. Yes,
it's like
so we appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, almost.
I love that song, but yeah.
That's really cool. And we do appreciate it. That was really nice of you.
Thank you.
And for the people listening, as this will be a podcast, it's spelling, it's www.lynnmonet. That's lynnmonet.com. That's where you can find all our books. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the best place to get them.
Yes. And you're going to love them. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
Thank you for having me. I love being on your show. I love you guys.
We love having you on.
Love having you on.
Been awesome. And stick around.
Yes, please.
We'll close up the show and come back and talk to you momentarily. And really, we're out of time. So that's all we have for this week. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much, Lynn.
Yes.
And
thank you to everybody.
And that's what we got. So we'll be back next Thursday. We have our friend Steve Auclair will be on here.
This is long life friend.
Yes, he's a good buddy of mine. And we hadn't seen each other in a long time. We recently got together, and it turns out he's been doing a lot of paranormal stuff. So he's got some really cool data, and he's a funny guy. We're gonna have a good time talking to him. That'll be Thursday, and then Saturday, Bigfoot and the Bunny. So until then, stay safe. Have a great week.
Happy Saturday.
We'll see you later.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.